Welcome in everybody to today's webinar from the Addiction Prevention Coalition. Thanks for joining us. As you know, we try to do these regularly and we're bringing folks to the awareness of the public that are involved in prevention or recovery. My name is Art Wimberly. I'm a person grateful to be in long-term recovery, a volunteer with the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and also a certified recovery coach and do work with 12-step and Enneagram in addiction. We've got today with us, we've got Mr. Paul Bryant that I'm going to introduce to you a little bit more in detail in just a moment. But as usual, we know that we have folks joining the webinar over the next few minutes. So we're going to give just a minute of a pause to let people join in. And want to remind you, again, as always, that we would love to try to answer any questions that you may have or ones that may arise out of our conversation with Paul today, because it's going to be pretty wide ranging. It's going to cover a number of topics, including his own recovery journey, as well as what he's doing now. And we're going to have a number of topics. So if you have a question, an observation, if you'll put it into the chat, we'll try to monitor that as we go. We'll do our best to get you an answer before we get off the air today. So thanks again for all of you that have already joined and those of you that'll be joining in just a minute here. And at that time, I'm going to bring Paul back in and let him give a little bit more fuller introduction. I met Paul actually this last year during COVID. And so the first time we met, we both had masks on. And the second time we didn't even recognize each other. So, which I think a lot of people are, of course, going through due to the pandemic. It's kind of an unusual thing. You're around people for a while and then you realize you don't even know what they look like. But so Paul, welcome in. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Art. And I'm honored and very appreciative of this opportunity. I really love the work that APC does. I love the people who work there. So I just want to thank you again for this wonderful opportunity.
Well, thanks. Paul, tell me, are you from the Birmingham area originally?
I am born and raised here, kind of all over Birmingham, Homewood, Hoover, Vestavia, Birmingham, all over, but I'm born and raised here. So Birmingham, I love the city. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love our city. I know that we can move to better things than we've currently been experiencing, but this is where I feel like my work needs to be done, it's in Birmingham. So I feel a deep sense of a connection to this place.
Yeah, well, we're similar in that way. I'm a lot older than you, but I was also born here out at the old West End Hospital and never left. And like you, as there's definitely a love affair with the city and feel like this is where I'm supposed to serve. And like you, hope that we'll all be a part of something new that's coming down. Well, tell us a little bit about your family.
So I am married to a wonderful, beautiful wife. Met her, goodness, she's gonna kill me, but like 9 years ago. I wish I could say like to the month and date, right, an hour, like minutes. She'll correct me, I'm sure after this she'll tell me. Sure. I've got 3 beautiful kids. My mom lives here as well. She was a teacher at Homewood. Have a younger brother who still lives here as well. And my grandfather still lives here as well. All my wife's family lives out in Fultondale pretty much. So pretty much all of our family is right here, and very, very beautiful family, beautiful wife, and 3 wonderful kids who drive me crazy, but I'll love them to death.
What are the kids' ages, Paul?
So I have a 14-year-old son, a 5-year-old son, and a 2-year-old daughter.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a family.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So when you're not at home and not spending time with your wife and your children, tell us about your profession right now. I know you're with the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and you're with the community justice programs, but tell us more about what that means.
So my current role is I am the peer coordinator for our specialty courts in Jefferson County that is underneath UAB's community justice programs. So what that means is I coordinate all of our recovery support services for our various specialty courts, so drug court, veterans court, mental health court, pretrial, used to do some community corrections, family wellness court, just kind of all of that stuff. So all the people on our team are certified recovery support specialists. I'm a certified recovery support specialist. And I started as a peer in drug court, actually for the drug court program that I had just graduated about a year before. Judge Owens, of course, APC, Judge Owens, I graduated under Judge Owens in 2016, and then came and worked for drug court just under a year later. About 11 months later, I came and started doing some work for drug court. And about a year after that, I got promoted into my current position, and we really started building our recovery support services throughout our specialty courts, jail, and just other various programs. So I'm very blessed to be a part of what UAB is doing. We are very cutting edge on what we're doing in criminal justice. Everyone at UAB deeply cares about what they're doing, all the way up from me all the way up to program managers, directors, executive directors. So very very blessed to be part of some great work that we're doing in the county.
Yeah, and mentioning Judge Owens, of course, she's chairman of the board here at APC, so we know her well.
Yes.
Fantastic supporter of what's going on. Would you say that part of your experience coming through her court years ago was a part of maybe what gave you a passion for helping other people that went through what you did?
I mean, in part, but I always knew that I wanted to help people. Like when I was the angry teenager, right, getting in trouble, I was like, oh, I wanted to grow up and do something with adolescents, and people have had similar experiences to me. And now that I'm grown, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to work with adolescents that were like me. I was a handful, Art, I don't know, but God will place me where he needs me to serve. So I'm not saying never,
Yeah.
And then even in active addiction, I was like, I'd make a really great drug and alcohol counselor if I could just quit getting high.
That's awesome. I love that line. All right. So that leads us kind of back into the story, part of the story we want to tell today, because we got background on where you're at now, but it was quite a circuitous route, a long and winding road, if you will, for you to get where you're at now. So I'd like to go back, and if you're willing, tell us about your story. When did your struggle with substance use disorder, in your mind, when did that begin having its seeds? How far back? Can you tell?
Oh, I can definitely tell. And I'm an open book on this. I believe that we only break the stigma by speaking up, and because how are people supposed to know how to find you if they don't know who you are,
Yeah.
So it started for me in seventh grade. I broke both my collarbones about 6 months apart wrestling. I always played team sports. This sense of connection was always very important to me, right? The sense of belonging, and I'll kind of touch on that later. But I broke my collarbone twice. During one of those times, maybe even both, I can't remember. I was given IV opiates at the hospital, and I remember immediately being like, "Hey, this is great! Like I don't even hurt anymore. I'm trying to go home and play, GoldenEye in '64, And they gave me a prescription after that. And at the time, I didn't relate getting high to being fun, because I didn't know people got high for fun, right? Like my father has substance use disorders, and in my mind growing up, it was like, why would people do this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't relate it to having fun, but that's definitely where it started. So when those pills ran out, I didn't go and search them or seek out for them, because I didn't know people did that for fun. But once I got into 8th grade, moving into 9th grade, and started experimenting, alcohol, marijuana, and then the prescription pills came back. So it was that's definitely how it got started.
Yeah. So you're amongst that, or I would say a really large percentage of people in the last couple of decades in this country that were introduced with an opiate or an opioid very innocently through the medical system to relieve pain from an accident or surgery. In fact, I think the numbers consistently bear out that a lot of folks, probably up to a third, if not closer to a half of people in this country, get introduced to those through a legal system. And then there's a percentage of us that really struggle with the way those things make us feel. And it's kind of like, this is the way life's supposed to be on these things. And they can really be attractive for some folks.
Yeah, and I think the statistics on that is actually somewhere right around 33% of people who are on opiates for, 10 weeks or more develop an opioid use disorder. So
Yeah,
that's a lot, right? That's
that's a
a
lot.
third of the people who are on these for 10 weeks or more at a time. So it's definitely a very significant number, of Americans, and that's a whole other issue with the pharmaceutical companies, what they did in the
Yeah,
late 90s, early 2000s. But yeah, it was just introduced like here it is.
yeah. So when you've got a history of, like most folks with substance use disorder over time, of overdose, when was the first one? Do you remember how old you were or what grade you were in?
Yeah, I was let's see, this would have been 10th grade. I would have been 16 at the time. Overdosed at school. Somebody had brought a bottle of pills. It was in a Tylenol bottle, and we didn't know what they were. We knew they were narcotics. So me and one of my buddies pretty much split the bottle and started taking them. We got caught on camera selling some pills, at school, at Homewood High School. And a bunch of us got in. I want to say a lot of trouble, but like prospectively, it wasn't a lot of trouble compared to what some of my other friends got in trouble for, but that was my first overdose. And looking back now, like I know that it was Xanax and methadone is what we were taking. So it's a miracle that we didn't die, you know.
Yeah.
Ended up in Children's Hospital psych unit for a few days, and then they let me back out, and school kind of brushed under the rug. Hey, you're going to do some alternative school for the
Yeah.
last half of the year, and that was pretty much all of that.
Oh, wow. So that was 10th grade. How did your high school career succeed after that or proceed after that?
And the thing about like my high school is I ended up dropping out halfway through my senior year. I did not drop out due to grades. Like my grades were okay. Like I could have kept going and graduating. Like my grades never suffered. What was big for me, my decision in dropping out was I had a friend who was selling weed, and I was selling some weed with him a little bit, and a lot of my other friends had already dropped out of school at that point as well. And then also like it was cutting into my using time. I was starting to kind of get a little bit harassed by at school by administration, kind of getting called to the office here and there, and kind of had people on my back, and I didn't like it. So I was like, well, I'm gonna drop out of school, and I did November of 2005. And I got my GED 2 weeks later, and I enrolled in UAB that January. So here in my mind, I'm like, look, y'all are just wasting, 6 months in y'all senior year, and I'm already in college.
Yeah.
Like I know what I'm doing.
You're fully in control, right?
Right. Yeah.
Step one, no, no
Mhm.
way, right? So not even in your mind, even though you've already struggled some, even though there was an overdose and even though it interrupted high school, sounds like in your mind, everything was manageable as far as you were concerned.
I felt like it was. Now, like, I don't want to confuse that with like, I knew that I had a problem when I was about 18 or 19, right? I remember being at the beach and with my girlfriend at the time and all of my friends there, and we were in Destin, Florida, and should have been like the time of my life, right? And I ran out of pills like day 1 or 2 down there, of course, right? I brought enough
Yeah,
for a week, but like on day 2, I'm out,
yeah,
and I remember saying out loud to myself, like, I've got to get back to Birmingham. I said it out loud to everybody. I said, I need to get back to Birmingham. And I called myself a drug addict, which is not great language to be using. Now we know a lot of stigma surrounds that, but I said, I need to go get pills. Like this is miserable. So I knew that it had become an issue, at least to the point where like I needed it to feel good, to feel that to really enjoy everything. I needed to be high, because I didn't really find my love for opiates until right before I dropped out. So at this point, it was a lot of marijuana, alcohol, some opiates here and there, sure, some benzos, but it wasn't until my senior year when I really discovered, what my drug of choice was, and then that changed everything.
yeah. Um, so I know now you mentioned a little while ago in your current position, part of what you're looking out for is in the court system is has to do with mental health issues as well. And I guess along around what a year or two later, you really began to struggle. In fact, it got so deep that you were going to take some extreme measures. Are you willing to talk about that?
Sure. So, and I want to back up just a little bit to this because I think this is an important part of my story. Is right before I dropped out, when I found the substance that ultimately I fell in love with. It was OxyContin. I remember doing it that first time, and I've heard it described this way by somebody else, but it perfectly describes my experience. Which, as soon as I used it, I was positive of three things. All right, I was positive that the people I was with was glad I was there. I was positive that I had something really important to say, and I was positive that they were dying to hear it. So it was that instant sense of I'm connected, right? Like, y'all are happy I'm here. I've got something important to say. Y'all are dying to hear it, just like everything's great. So
which kind of connects to that point you made a little while ago, and I think you'll want to talk about again, which is the belonging.
Mm-hmm.
The connection in the community and
Team sports, that's why I love team sports. It's why I did a lot of what I did growing up, trying to be a part of, belong. And I found that with substances, I could chemically induce that feeling, right? And it was a chemically induced spiritual experience, right? It was that sense of connectedness like I've never experienced before. So after that, the next 3 years, things got bad. Pretty bad, out of control. I was introduced to heroin at this point. In between this time, I justified it because I wasn't using IV. I was snorting it, so it was okay, right? I'm not like those people.
Yeah, we all of us addicts have a hierarchy.
Right, exactly. At least I'm not as bad as them.
Yeah.
So I'm 21 years old. The relationship I've been in for the last almost 4 years had suddenly ended. Not very great, experience there. I knew that my drug use was getting out of control. I didn't exactly know how to stop it. So one night I got really, really high and really, really drunk. And I think this was October of 2008. And I put a 9mm Beretta to my head and I pulled the trigger. And as soon as that gun went off, it missed. Obviously, I'm still here. I think that I was so intoxicated it wasn't pointing straight at my head. As soon as that gun went off, I had an instant sense of relief. Like, oh my God, thank God that didn't happen. Right. So yeah, you would think that like that would be the moment where Paul decided he was going to turn his life around, but unfortunately it was several more years after that.
Yeah. So flash forward then a couple of, and again, thanks so much for being willing to share that, because you and I know so many people that struggle with those depressive issues, especially when there is a history of substance use disorder. And it is very important for us in this culture to be willing to talk deeply and honestly about those struggles. Otherwise, as you said earlier, people don't feel like they can ask for help. So thank you so much for
until we talk about it, it doesn't get better, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have any guilt or shame over any of that stuff. Recovery has freed me from that. Everything that I view it as like this, like everything that I've been through is only valuable if I use it to help somebody else. Otherwise, like, what was it for? Like, what was it for? So when I was using, like, you wouldn't know it like knowing me today, but I was just the depressive Edgar Allan Poe, thunderstorms, black ravens, woe is me. I mean, it was awful almost like every single day of my existence.
Yeah. So as you said, anybody thinking rationally would have thought that's about as far down as you could go. That'll be the bottom and you'll start looking for help. But it took a couple of more years, right, before you actually really cried out.
It did. So what happened there was I knew after that experience that I probably needed to get off the heroin and the benzos, because I blamed it like that was the problem, right? So what I did was I went to methadone because I thought that was going to be my solution. Now I'm a fan of methadone. I want to say that I'm a fan of Suboxone, medicated assisted treatment, and medicated assisted recovery. For me, methadone did not work because I continued drinking, I continued smoking weed, I continued to take Xanax, and I didn't do anything differently in my life is just instead of using heroin, I used methadone, and everything else was the exact same. So
Right.
I thought that was going to fix me,
Yeah.
magically.
Right. Right.
And
But had not taken any steps at that point to actually deal with the inner issues that always are a part of our story. Right.
yeah, for sure. So I ran from that for a while. And
What
then
what made you try ask for help the first time? Because as you said, it was a couple of years later, right? Can you remember what prompted you to actually say, "I've got to get some help outside of myself"?
sure, I remember, and I think ask is a very strong and probably dishonest word for what happened. The first time that I went to treatment. This was about 3 years later. I was 24 at this point. And some stuff happened in an apartment I was living in. I was very, very intoxicated, and Birmingham police was called. And they pretty much told my mom, like, you're gonna have to take him to treatment or we're gonna take him to jail. And I didn't go to treatment that day. It was actually a few days to a week later. I'm not sure. This is where part of my story gets really fuzzy, just because the amount of Xanax I was consuming at the time. I have like a couple of weeks here that are just lost. I have no idea. I do know that I eventually woke up in treatment, and 24 years old in treatment, and the first thing I did was pick up that phone and called my mom and said, "Mom, you've got to get me out of here. I'm not like these people." Like I'm
Yeah.
not like them.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my introduction to recovery. So I didn't stay in recovery after that. But that was the first time in my life that I was really exposed to, here's recovery. This is what it looks like. This is what you can do. And here are people in recovery, right? Now, I always want to talk about this, especially for this webinar for APC, is I was 24 years old at this point. So you look at the numerous arrests, the numerous counselors I'd seen, the overdose in school, the attempted suicide attempt, all the doctors I had seen, the various emergency room visits for overdoses or being intoxicated, and not once during all those times did anybody try to connect me with treatment or any type of recovery support stuff.
Really?
It was swept under the rug, right? Like
Wow.
various times police departments arrested me with drugs and they threw the drugs away and maybe charged me with public intox or minor in possession, right? Minor in consumption.
Yeah.
All these, school counselors or everything. But see, I think that speaks to the stigma, right? Is that we're so afraid to talk about it and we're so afraid to educate people on addiction and recovery that we don't, because it's uncomfortable for people to talk about it. So for almost 9 years at this point, there had been various opportunities for intervention, that never happened until I get to where I am at 24, so.
And I know you well enough to know that when you describe that and all the people involved, you're not blaming them and you're not bitter about that.
Mm-mm.
But I think that tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think that's one of the things that's part of what spurred your passion to improve intervention and drive it down as to the earliest age possible.
Yeah, definitely. I don't blame those people. I think that they were doing what they thought was right. They weren't doing anything intentionally malicious, or intentionally to harm me down the road. They just weren't educated or informed about addiction and recovery. And you'd be surprised how many doctors in our country are not educated on addiction and recovery. And we come into emergency medicine and they just don't know, or just primary care doctors or therapists, right? Or I mean, whoever, they're not educated enough on addiction or recovery besides what they maybe took for one class, 8 years ago.
Right.
So no, I don't blame them or hold them accountable. Like, I was my own worst enemy. Everything that I did, I created, right? Like it was nobody's fault but my own.
Well, thankfully, we seem to have turned at least a corner the last few years where we're beginning to understand how the perfect storm set us up for what we've been going through for the last 20 years. And we're beginning to talk about it differently. As you said, part of what APC is trying to do is continue to broaden the conversation, uh, communicate, educate, make people aware, find resources, connect people to resources. And so we seem to at least turned one corner toward this conversation, but we got a long way to go.
got a long way to go. And I think it starts like with this, right? With people sitting down, talking, having honest, open conversations, about like, this is what it was like. But this is what it's like now, and this is what's possible to, it's like recovery is possible. And we need to be yelling that from the mountaintops. We need to be screaming that recovery is possible and showing people that recovery is possible and also helping them, right? And that starts like here and then at our local level. I mean, addiction touches every area of our lives and every area of our society, so somebody's going to notice somewhere, it's just, are they, well informed enough to do something about it?
To know how to have the
Mhm.
conversation, start the conversation, yeah, or connect somebody. I know we do, one of the things APC does is a family support group for loved ones in addiction, substance use disorder. And we're constantly saying in those groups every month that recovery is. I know in some of their stories, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And we have to keep reminding them that more people, way more people recover than don't. And I think I don't think we think that way in the culture anymore. So it's a big deal for us to keep saying that.
It is, so to kind of get back to like, so right, 24 in treatment, and I left
Yep.
treatment, and I kind of, I was intrigued, right? But the first meeting I ever went to, recovery support meeting I ever went to, I was angry because it was a Friday night and everyone was there at 8 o'clock and they were happy and laughing. And
Yeah.
I thought they were all full of it or they were going out to drink afterwards. But I was intrigued though at the same time, because they kind of sounded like they might be like me. So I started building a community. I got involved in a recovery program, and started doing that. But I never quit drinking. I was drinking the whole time through it, so it didn't work, Um,
So in your mind, do you think you had decided, or maybe decided is not even the right term, but the default was if I don't do certain drugs, but I can drink. Is that kind of what?
Definitely, right? Definitely, because I didn't think alcohol was a problem. And it might not have been at 24, it probably was. I mean, really. But by the time I hit 28, it definitely was a problem. So that was 2010, I think, when that happened, May of 2010. So I might have been 23, not 24. I think I was 23. And then so the next 6 years was me drinking a lot and trying to control my substance use. I tried everything, I tried church and praying it away here and there, even though it wasn't sincere. I tried Suboxone here and there, but that was just a stopgap for the heroin.
Yeah, yeah.
Tried changing my environment, whatever, and nothing worked. So the next 6 years is what really drove home to me that I was powerless over this, right? That there was nothing that I was going to do on my own. And like I said, I met my wife throughout when I was in active addiction. So, God bless her. She was I got sober. We've been together almost 2 years, a little over 2 years, probably by the time I got sober. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So at the point where there was this dramatic turn, was there an event in the family that kind of helped push that along?
Yeah. So what happened before my last time I was a resident at an inpatient treatment was got married to my wife. My wife, we decided we were going to have a kid, right? Because I thought the kid was going to fix me. And she's pregnant. And in the last year and a half of my using, I was getting kicked out of my house time and time and time again, and living with a friend. It's important to note that right before I went back to treatment, this friend died in a car crash, and that's important for what I'm about to bring up. But my best friend, when I say best friend, I literally had like 9 or 10 best friends. Most of them are dead now, So my wife was pregnant. I've been kicked out of my house. The day my son's born, she lets me come up to the hospital, and I start detoxing in the hospital. So while I was present for my son's birth, and I was there. I wasn't all the way mentally or emotionally there, because I mean I was sick. The next 3 days I didn't use. I somehow manipulated my wife into letting me come back home with her, and I went back home with her, and I stayed sober for almost another 2 weeks. And I was like, hey, this is it. The kid's going to fix me. Right. Dude,
Yeah.
that's all I needed was the kid, obviously. Like, now I haven't used in over 2 weeks. And then of course the day came where I did use, and about 2 weeks later, and I went with the intention to buy a little bit of weed. And before I left, I'd done close to a half gram of heroin, took in a bunch of Xanax, crashed my car on the way home. And anyways, my wife and my mom, which is important, collectively put their feet down. Right. Because usually my wife kicks me out. I'm going to mom's or, whatever, or I'm going to my friend's house, but he had just died in a car wreck. I probably should have been in that car with him because he wanted me to go back with him to where he lived about 2 days before he died. And the only reason I didn't was because my son was about to be born, so I stayed home. Had I left with him, I would have been in that car with him. I'd be dead. He hit a Peterbilt tractor trailer head on, and I would have gone back with him, so my brother had just died, basically. My best friend's a brother to me. And yeah, my wife and mom collectively put their feet down. My wife said, you're out of here. My mom said, you're not coming here. I had totaled my car that day. So I didn't have a car to live in, out, or go anywhere. And my option was pretty much go back to treatment or walk through downtown Birmingham, find a shelter to live at. So I went back to treatment. But see, I knew I needed to go back to treatment about a year before I went back. But, football season was coming up and I had to wait till after that, right? And then, the son was born. So, and then I went back to treatment for my last time, February 19th of 2016.
Wow, that's marvelous. So getting through all those different phases, hitting what looked like would surely be a bottom and then dropping even further. But finally getting to the place where in treatment, something began to take hold. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe can you recognize in hindsight, what are some of the things that began to make a difference? Was it commitment to family? Was it 12-step work? Was it all of the above?
So the big thing for me, when I was growing up, I used to always say I wasn't going to turn out like my father, right? Like I don't hold any resentment or ill feeling towards my father. I love him. He is my father, but he was not present for 99% of my childhood. And I always said that I was not going to be like that, and then there we are. I have, like, so my 14-year-old is really my stepson. He's my son. I don't ever refer to him as my stepson except just to make this distinction that this is my first son that was born. So that changed me, right? Seeing a child brought into this world that I created had sparked some change in me. So in a way, when I was thinking that the kid is what I needed, I was right, but I needed more than just the kid, know? So I was in treatment and I started remembering everything, right? Because I've been going to, meetings and stuff, and for the last, 6 years on and off, because I thought like I go to a meeting, hang out with some people in recovery, and maybe it rubs off on me. And I started to remember, and I started to not only need recovery, but I started to want recovery. And then I'm day 4 in the treatment, and this is what cemented my whole thing. Is I'm day 4 into treatment, things are going great, I feel great, I want recovery, I need recovery. We're sitting down to do this meditation, and they're like, clear out your pockets. And I reach in my pockets, that little coin pocket, in your jeans, I reach in there and there's a Xanax bar in there that they missed at intake. And my heart just sunk as soon as I touched it, because I knew what was about to happen. Right. And I went to the bathroom, and I remember going to the bathroom to this treatment place and looking at myself in the mirror and being absolutely disgusted, and started crying, because I was looking at this pill in my hand, knowing that, like, I want recovery, I need recovery, I don't want to use, but knowing that I was about to take that pill, and I did, so that really kind of cemented for me, like, you cannot do this by yourself, no matter how bad you want it or how bad you need it. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. So at that point, like, I completely just bought in. I bought into everything, right? They said jump, I said how high and on which foot, like I did everything that they suggested I do. I really just tried to grab hold of recovery while I was still in treatment. I started praying to God again. And it wasn't the God, get me out the back of this police car. God, let, the dope man answer the phone. It was genuine prayers like, God, help me, shape me, guide me, mold me, help me serve, work through me. Um, and I started to be honest. I would like to be able to tell you that from that day forth, I was just automatically 100% honest, which is not true. I started though to be more honest than I had ever been in my life, and
which is key. I know in my own recovery, in those early days, just being as honest as I could began to make a difference. But you're right; it's very difficult to be fully honest, even when you want to be.
It is, and it was right because at that time I wasn't free from all the guilt and shame. I still had all that. I'd internalized all that stigma to where I believed that I was a bad person because of what I did, and I was a bad person because of what I was, So I started to be more honest. And that's a gradual process, becoming more honest as I can be, till we get to the point, like, we're years down the road. So I think that that was it. I submitted, I finally just like submitted, and I was done trying to do it my way. And I'll tell you this too, like if that private pay insurance company wouldn't have taken me in that day, I don't know if I'd still be sober today. I don't know if I would have been willing to wait 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know if I would have been willing to go to a state funded place that day. I have no idea. So everything happening just the way it happened. And I also wouldn't have gone back had my mom and wife not put their feet down. Had one of them let me stay or go there, I wouldn't have gone back. I wouldn't have. I'd like to say like I just made the decision to go back. Like, no, I was kind of forced into it. Now deep down I wanted it, but I was still, kind of forced into it.
Well, that's an important side note. And because I'm both a recovering addict and in a family of addiction, I'm coming at this from both angles, and like most people, honestly. And a big thing in family systems is getting people on the same page, not to turn against their loved one when they're struggling, but to actually pull together to offer the wisest avenues or cut off those that are unwise. And that's one of the hardest things for families to do. So that was a big turning point, that those two important folks in your life were able to do that. And
they still finally did, yeah,
but still love you enough to say we'll support you when there's the right things going on. Yeah.
Right. And when I came home from treatment, they were there. My wife came and saw me in treatment, and my mom, and they brought my son. And my experience in recovery is not like a lot of people's, because for me, like after that day, like day 4 into treatment, like things got good, and they got good quick, and they pretty much stayed good. And I don't mean that to say I haven't dealt with a lot, because I've had a lot of death. I've had more friends die. I've had my cousin die. I've had both of my grandmothers die. My father-in-law just recently passed. I've dealt with a lot of death and also had to overcome some adversity too. So like, it just hasn't been sunshine and rainbows, either. But, for the most part, like things got good, a lot better, a lot quicker, and I just grabbed a hold of the hands that were reaching out to me.
Yeah. Well, as a big book would say, we began to learn how to deal with life on life's terms, rather than the way we always insisted on trying to get through. Yeah. So, okay. So really, it sounds like, I'm trying to do the math in my head, and it sounds like you just celebrated 5 years recently.
Just celebrated 5 years on February 20th. So really it should be like February 24th, but February 20th is the date that I go by,
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's crazy because I never would have thought. I remember being in treatment, and one of my really one of my best friends, that I've met since recovery, he came and he spoke at the treatment place I was at. And he didn't speak, but I was like, man, how long you been sober? And he was like, man, like 60 days. And I was like, what? Like, how'd you get to 60 days, dude?
Yeah.
Like sitting in treatment. And now, he's got a little over, 5 years, and, one of my best friends, so it's just, it's crazy sometimes to look at where my life has gotten.
Yeah. I know when I was thinking if I could get to a year, I just thought that would be, I've told this story before. I'll never forget this. In my first year of recovery, I was in a 12-step fellowship out of state, and it was they were giving chips, and a guy took a 17-year chip. But right after that, because it was a 17-year chip, they asked him if he wanted to say something, and he told just a little bit, and he gave his age, and 75. And I did the math, and I'm like, wait a minute, he was 58 when it changed for him. So there's a lot of hope in that. For some reason, that gave me a lot of hope that I could get to 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something about being in a room where somebody's celebrating something like that that really changes the dynamic of hope for so many people that are just starting out.
It does, well, I think that's what we do. We've got to give hope, we've got to press home the idea that it's never too late until you're dead,
Yep.
that's the only time that it's too late. And we got to inspire, because when I entered recovery, I had men who inspired me, right? Like they gave me hope, in 2010 all the way through back up to 2016, and then still continuing to this day. These men give me hope, that they give me hope about what maybe I can become, what I can accomplish, how I can serve, right, and how I can better serve God. They give me hope for that, and I think that's what we're doing here.
Yep. Well, that's the 12 step, right? We're giving back what we were given freely. We want to give out freely. What came around won't go. If it doesn't go around, it won't come back around again, right? So that brings us kind of back to where we started with you and your current position, what you're doing. But I want you to talk a little bit about some of your kind of future passions or hopes or interests. You've already got a couple of this is one of the most amazing things to me is through all of that GED and then a college degree, right? And then another one, right? And then now you're going for a master's, right? What's that in?
Yeah, so when I got sober, I had a GED and hadn't held a job consistently for years. I now got 2 college degrees. I'm in graduate school earning my master's in social work. I've done all this while working full time and raising kids, and then also dedicating the time to my recovery and to try to help other people in recovery, right? So I would love to say that, like, yeah, I just exerted my power of will, and everything's been great. I mean, it wasn't. It's been God's grace, it's been God's grace and the willingness that God's instilled in me. And also, I mean, of course, like I've done the work, right? Like, God instilled the willingness in me. He gave me the grace, and none of this would have been accomplished, without God. But I've also done what I need to do on my end, and handle it. So yeah, I'm finishing up grad school. I'll be done in December. And as for the future, I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of things that I'm interested in. This is a conversation I've had with a lot of people lately about what are you doing after you graduate, and I 100% believe that God's going to place me where I'm supposed to be. So I'm not sure, but my interest though is definitely recovery. Right, it's definitely addiction and recovery. I know that I went through school and I got sober for this. Criminal justice is a huge passion of mine, and criminal justice is almost oxymoronic, in this country when you use those words together. But it's definitely an area that needs change. A teacher actually sparked a deeper interest for this for me. Dr. Dion King. She took a class with her, and anyways, the racial inequities in this country, especially as they surround the criminal justice system, is something that I've really started to become passionate about. Because I mean, I look at it like this too. Like I have a friend who I grew up with who's in St. Clair Maximum Security Correctional Facility right now. Right, our records should look almost identical if I would have been charged with everything. My stuff got dismissed or null priced or just not even charged with, period. Right, him as a Black man in this country, he got charged every single time that he walked across the street without looking both ways. He was charged. And I think that we do a pretty, like I'd say this, we do a really good job at the judicial level in Jefferson County, but we know that so much stuff happens before then, and that the judges don't control the people who are in front of them or how they get there. Right. So we do a really good job at the judicial level, as far as fair and equity and treatment. But, some things need to change in how we view stuff. drug reform policy is something I'm very interested in, because I think we keep trying to fix, let's fix it and let's make it better. I think that we need to throw the system away that we have, and we need to make it what we have is not working. And I'm not going to get political on this. If y'all want to hit me up on my email, I'll be fine to get more political with y'all on this, but things need to change.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing that's clear, one thing that both the opioid epidemic has exposed at a deeper level, and I think even the pandemic, COVID, has exposed at a deeper level, is that there are inequities. We don't have to assume that everybody in the system is racist, but I think we do have to take a deeper look at the way the systems work.
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
don't work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I've got a family member who's a captain, of a police force, and he's a great cop in the way that he runs the jail, and his staff is top notch, as a white male. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for sure. Like, not everyone's bad, the majority of them aren't even bad, but just on a systemic level, the way that everything is set up is it's broken. So you have the good people that can't make a difference just because of how systems and policies are in place. It's not there to serve. I mean, and if we truly start looking at addiction, mass incarceration as more of a public health issue, instead of this behavioral or societal issue, and we're looking at it as a public health issue, I think that we could make some changes.
That I think the new Jim Crow, when that book came out 8 or 9 years ago, it really it woke us up to the idea that the war on drugs had done so much damage, even if well intended, and even when participated in by good people, that was not the way to go, and it set up some unintended consequences that we're still paying for.
Oh, it's awful. The war on drugs, Nixon, his whole war on drugs was a war on Black America and the anti-war left. I mean, that's why it was created. And then we see incarceration rates go up, 600, 700%, after the war on drugs. Now, crime has actually gone down, right? Crime rates have dropped since then, but incarceration has gone up because of recidivism and drug crimes, right? We've got to quit punishing people for drugs. We have got to rehabilitate them. Portugal's got a great model, if y'all want to look at that in your own time, about how they deal with substance use, drug possession. It's a really, really great model. But I think that we're getting there to not be so punitive and be more rehabilitative, but it's slow, because we have to work within the structures that exist, and it's difficult.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that there are folks like you that have come through and have recovered and are in long-term recovery that care enough and have thought through this to be in the fight, because that's what it's going to take from a ground roots level to begin making a difference on this over time. One other thing I think that you're interested in is mentoring in the systems, because you've seen the lack of that in most systems. So is that something that you're thinking about it in the future, how to help develop or place mentors or get people interested in things like that?
Yeah, because I think we need that, right? Like, we need the people who have that experience, and then but also like the training and everything, right? To do that. We need more of those at every level, right? Like, I'm actually have the wonderful opportunity that our current judge, drug court judge, Judge Fortune, she's wonderful too. Judge Owens went up to circuit court, in which we hated that she left, but Judge Fortune came in, and she's wonderful. She's been great. But she set me up with this. I'm actually going to mentor some adolescents, right? I talked about at the beginning. I wasn't going to do any work with adolescents or young kids, but these kids are between the ages of 10 and 17. And me and a large group of men are going to go do a breakfast with them and do some mentoring. So, as much as I say, like, oh, I don't want to work with adolescents, like, it seems like they're always kind of popping up here and there. So,
yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and share today, and for what you're doing and the life you're leading. I want to do a couple of quick announcements for some things that are coming up, and then I want to come back and wrap it up with you in just a moment. For those of you that are looking for resources, APC is collaborating and doing another pop-up resource fair. The one a month and a half ago was really successful, coming out of COVID as the restrictions ease. So June 11th, there'll be a free lunch at Lynn Park and a pop-up resource for folks that are struggling with substance use disorder or those that love them and are looking for resources as well. And also starting on May 28th, there is a special series running on CBS network, some of which was recorded locally, and it's called What Every Family Needs to Know About Opioids. And so because that's such a huge issue, as Paul shared earlier, a big part of his story, there is this more need for public awareness, education about it. And so look out for the CBS special, What Every Family Needs to Know About Opioids. And it'll be airing on May the 28th. And then on June 17th, next month, we'll come back around with another live webinar here at APC, where a young man named Mike Foxhall is going to share his recovery story and what he's doing in the community now. So look out for those things. As always, if you need more information, get on the apcbirmingham.org website, and there's lots of information there. But back to Paul. Paul, again, thank you so much for what you're doing, for taking the time out of, I know, based on everything you're involved in, I'm sure it has to be a hectic day to share this time. If people wanted to reach out to you for any of the issues you talked about, what's the best way that they could get to you?
The best way is email, and I believe we're going to put that in the chat.
Okay.
It's and I'll say it real quick for anybody. It's Bryant, Bryant at uabmc.edu. Email is typically the best reason because I can guarantee that when I'm sitting in front of it, I'll see it and probably respond. To whereas phone calls, texts, like,
yeah,
you might roll the dice. I might not ever respond to that. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being generous with that, and we will put that in the chat here shortly. And if again, if you want to reach out to Paul, and you don't, and I think she's already got it in there for us. That's great. Paul, again, man, thank you. It's been a pleasure meeting you this last year. We look forward to collaborating with you as you go forward. And thanks again.
Thank you so much, Art. I appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for joining us this time. We'll see you next month.